Thank you. All right, welcome everyone to the 2024 post-election donor survey briefing. That's a mouthful. So if you're wondering who's behind this survey, the two people that you see right here were kind of the starters or creators back in 2022. The two of us came together, and for both of our organizations, Donor Organizer Hub and Blue Tent, we thought, the traditional nonprofits, they have all of this information about donors, how they behave, how they want to be communicated to and respected by. And I speak for myself here as on behalf of Donor Organizer Hub that when we talk about donors, we're all donors, right? Like we all contribute to causes that we care about. And there's a specific slant of how things look when we're talking about building political change in our lifetimes. And so the two of us did this originally in 2022 with 9 progressive groups, 1,000 respondents. This year, large and in charge, we went up to nearly 20 organizations participated, 3,000 respondents. And just for a bit of background on Donor Organizer Hub, and then I'll pass it to David to talk about Blue Tent. Donor Organizer Hub, we focus on building the base in our movements through everyday people fundraising for them. And you can imagine that when everyday people are fundraising in their networks, what they really care about is being able to speak confidently to their friends and family about their donations going to an impactful place. And that's where David Callahan and Blue Tent come in. So David, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Thank you, Haley. Great to be here with all of you. Thanks, Haley, for help working with me and putting this together. And so a little bit about Blue Tent. Blue Tent was founded in 2021 to offer advice to progressive and democratic donors to give with maximum impact. And so 2024 was our second election cycle. And this survey is our second survey, as Haley mentioned. So I'm going to share my screen and just walk you through the survey. And then we'll have time for a discussion. Yay. Okay. Let's go into slideshow mode here. Okay, so here are the names of all the co-sponsoring groups. We had a whole bunch of them. I'm sure many of you are from some of these groups. We had 3,220 people who responded. And we asked the demographic questions about the respondents. 86% were white, overwhelming number, majority women. And this was not a wealthy group of individuals. The ordinary financial means was really pretty common. Only 7% described themselves as wealthy or having a lot of extra money. Last year we asked, in 2022, we asked a age question. Somehow that got dropped out of the demographic this time. But when we asked the question last time, 76% of respondents were over the age of 65. And my guess is certainly for this survey, the vast majority are over the age of 50. And that is reflective of the Democratic donor base writ large. Older people tend to have more discretionary income and often be in a kind of giving phase of life. Can talk more about that if people are interested. Many of the people who are involved or who responded and are involved in these fundraising networks, they are veteran givers. They've been giving for many years or decades. We had a smaller share who were part of the so-called class of 2016, with the 2016 election brought so much new energy into the progressive infrastructure, lots of new donors, lots of new entrepreneurs creating organizations. The next figure here may not be surprising to anybody, that 72% of people have significantly increased their giving in recent years. I'm going to talk near the end about what we can look forward to after the 2024 election, but just to preview that a little bit, people remain pretty fired up. I don't think that the powerful donor action that we've been seeing on the left is going to be dying down anytime soon. Again, these were not heavy, big rollers. Most of the people who responded were small to medium donors. 50% gave less than $750. That said, there were some pretty major donors who responded. 10% gave $10,000 or more, and there was a small fraction that gave $100,000 or more. How typical are our respondents? In many ways, not so typical. I mean, these are all people who are involved in fundraising networks. Most Democratic donors are not involved in fundraising networks. They're not, linked into the kind of advice and guidance that comes from fundraising networks. But the survey went out through fundraising networks. It'd be super interesting if Act Blue did this at some point and did a much more comprehensive survey of their millions of donors. But we haven't been able to interest them in doing a donor survey. The respondents in our survey were more likely to be women than is typical. 55% of U.S. donors to federal candidates and PACs in 2024 were men, according to Open Secrets. Our respondents also gave more than most U.S. donors. Many donors are really down more at the under $500 level. So we asked this time, like last time, about people's sources of information. To us, this is an incredibly important question because you cannot be an effective donor if you do not have really good sources of information. So where are people getting their information? Number one is candidates. Number two is reading the news. And then you can see the rest of the responses. Democratic Party is high up, funding intermediaries at 47%. Of course, remember, a lot of the people who are coming in to the survey to begin with are connected to funding intermediaries. It's hard to know how much traction funding intermediaries have made with the overall Democratic donor pool of people. Places like, Movement Voter Project or Focus for Democracy have been around for a number of years, and they have certainly grown their lists. And we're seeing a lot more people involved in funding intermediaries, but it remains a minority of donors, probably a small minority. If we had a better, larger pool of information, a larger pool of donors we were surveying, small minority of Democratic donors are involved in or get their information from funding intermediaries. I find it very concerning that the top way that people get their information is from candidates, because we know that candidates do not communicate with donors in an honest fashion. If you get, spammy emails and texts from candidates, which, in fairness, actually come from their often not so ethical fundraising operations, not from them themselves. They probably don't even see a lot of the correspondence that's going out in their name, but it's often filled with just distortions of what the polling shows or how much they need money. Even people who should know better, like AOC, sends out emails saying she's fighting for her life in a Democratic plus 35 district. So it's not good news that people are getting so much information from candidates. Reading the news, also, this is not where we want people to get their information, because people often sort of, through the news, they kind of lock into, get excited about celebrity candidates, or, the Beto O'Rourke's and Stacey Abrams's of the world, who may or may not actually need their donations or have any chance of winning compared to the other things that donors might give to. In terms of how hands-on or hands-off are people, well, the good news from this slide is that only 8% said they give in the moment. And I know that all of us have done that at one point or the other. It's the drinking and giving phenomenon, perhaps on the Facebook feed, and you're excited about some candidate's pitch and you make a donation only to later realize that they were in a completely uncompetitive race, and you didn't know that. But most people, they proceed more systematically. They do their own research, or they rely on trusted sources and endorsements. They're not just sort of firing off without thinking. So what are the funding intermediaries that people have used? Well, maybe not surprisingly, the Democratic Party committees and super PACs are high on the list. And and then you sort of get down to Movement Voter Project or Sister District. Emily's list is well known. Swing left here, it's worth noting that a good portion of the respondents came from swing left. So I'm not sure that this figure is in any way representative of Democratic donors. I think that the figures at the top are much more representative. And again, I don't think that this is a good thing. It's not that, I think that Democratic Party committees and super PACs are terrible. It's that their fundraising practices are often misleading and shrill and panicky and provide information which is not reliable. And of course, when you give money to these organizations, it's almost always going to ad buys and very conventional campaign approaches, which we think donors need to move away from. I mean, that's a through line of Blue Tent's work, that donors need to spend less money giving to candidates and more giving to organizations that work year round to engage voters and then get out the vote during election time. We asked the question, I love these two numbers because they are kind of at odds with each other. 77% of people responding to the survey said they often or always have enough information, whereas 53% said they have confidence their money is used effectively. Now, how can these two numbers be right? I mean, if only half of people have confidence that their money is used effectively, then clearly they don't have enough information as to where their donors are going, how their donations are used. We asked that the survey tool had space for comments on almost all the questions, and there's a lot of great comments across the survey. It'd be fun to go through more of them, but we don't really have time for that. But here's some comments on whether donations are used effectively. I love this. I wish I knew. I do a lot of hoping without certainty. No real clue, right? And these comments went on for pages. I mean, I give you 50 more comments just like this of people kind of scratching their heads and saying, "What? I don't really know. I don't know how to find that out." That's a problem, So as in 2022, we asked about lots of different questions in terms of how people prioritize their giving, what kinds of races they prioritize when they start giving. It's been a recurring theme of the progressive fundraising infrastructure that people need to give earlier in the election cycle, because when you give earlier, your money has more impact, and it allows organizations, particularly voter engagement groups, to make plans, to hire staff, to map out what they're going to do with what resources. So the sooner we start, the better. Ideally, you just give all the time and in an ongoing way. And I find this chart encouraging here that, almost a quarter of respondents said they donate in an ongoing way. That's crucial to fund year-round voter engagement work and organizing. 21% said they start a year before, also great to hear. And very few were kind of last minute givers, at least according to the survey. I mean, in our experience at Blue Tent, there was a lot of people making donations right up to the last minute, and a lot of donations. In fact, our highest giving totals per week were really in the last 2 months of the campaigns, so or the election. So I'm not sure this 2 months or later is really that representative. I'm sure there's other fundraising networks could speak to that question as well in terms of when they saw their money coming in. I think it's well known that most money comes in late, and that's a problem. But this is an area where we are making progress. This has been a recurring message, just pounded in again and again to the Democratic and progressive donor world that, hey, you need to start earlier. Where do people give? Most, as I said, a through line of Blue Tent's work is that people need to shift more resources to organizations. And it's not that we don't want candidates to be adequately financed, but rather like a number of other groups that are, working the same terrain. We'd like to see a rebalancing of resources. The vast lion's share of money goes to candidates and party committees and is spent on ad buys, and a lot of that advertising, as you get later in the election, doesn't even hits people who've already voted, and in some cases, people who are living outside of the congressional district. So there's a lot of problems with conventional Democratic campaign tactics, and we need that work to be well financed, but we also need to shift significant resources toward organizations. You see in this, our respondents, it's mainly candidates, but some orgs, a smaller share or mainly orgs, but some candidates. So I think that this is progress. This is more encouraging than what we saw in 2022. Of course, in 2022, we didn't have Movement Voter PAC as one of our partners, and this year we did, and that may reflect or surely reflects these findings. We asked people, who do donate mostly to candidates, or almost everybody donates some money to candidates. What is it that determines your selection? And control of a legislative chamber. I find these findings encouraging. That you want, when you're giving to candidates, you want the money to go to the most high stakes races and to the candidates in such races who need funding the most. And so the fact that people are with it enough to give to races where a legislative chamber is in play is really great. And unfortunately, only 7% say that whether a candidate is well funded or not is something that they consider, when it should be very high up in one's calculation. And I think that site Oath, which was not part of our survey, Oath has done a very good job of making that information available. Swing Left makes that information available. There's now really strong tools that donors can use to find out how to give to the highest impact races where candidates are most in need of funding and their dollars can make a difference. When we asked in the survey, what factors determine which organizations you give money to? Very interesting finding here. You can see sort of a split among donors that, there's more and more very data-driven donors who are attracted to funding intermediaries like Focus for Democracy and Mind the Gap, that offer real hard, rigorous quantitative evidence of impact. And then there's donors who are really committed to grassroots groups with community ties, who many of which work year round to engage voters. And at Blue Tent, we recommend both. And different donors are excited by different kinds of giving options, and we think it's really important to describe both kinds of options for donors and let them decide what resonates most with them. Again, though, whether a group is already well funded was not part of people's calculus, and it should be. And a place like Focus for Democracy really takes that into consideration very carefully, as does Movement Voter Project in their analysis. They look around and they, especially as the election gets closer, and they try to figure out like who really needs money, where can later giving have the most impact. They pass along that information to donors, and it's important for donors to pay attention to the adequacy of funding of both organizations and candidates, and all the more so in the final weeks of an election, when many organizations have met their budgets, they have enough money, they don't have time to hire more field staff, and you don't want to give to that organization. You want to give with an organization that is scrambling to close last minute budget gaps. Likewise with candidates, many candidates get close to the finish line, and some of them are overfunded and may end the election with surplus funds, and some are wildly underfunded and badly need that money for last minute ads that could make the difference. We asked an interesting question this year, in the wake of the war in Gaza, and various indications that some donors were pulling back from progressive organizations. This is a kind of tricky thing to track. At Inside Philanthropy, which is a site that I run focused on C3 giving, a lot of conversation among the staff as to whether this is a real phenomenon of a donor pullback from progressive organizations. So we asked it in this survey. We asked a question along these lines in this survey, and majority of people said no, that they have not, ideological political differences have not caused them to pull back, but 26% said yes. And there's and then the comments here went on for like pages and pages, with many people actually, pulling back ideologically. It wasn't just more moderate donors pulling back from progressive organizations. It was progressive donors who were disenchanted with some more moderate organizations. So, but by and large, it was donors who were disenchanted with certain aspects of progressive organizations that have moved too far left, or focused too much on identity politics, or they had differences over Gaza. I think this is a very interesting question to dig into further, and maybe down the line we'll have an opportunity to do that. We're always, if you work in a fundraising network, you're always wondering, like, what is the thing that will excite people and get them to go above and beyond and give more consistently. And so we've asked that question over the past 2 years, that when people have given more, what has led them to give more, given them the confidence to make larger donations or start giving in the first place. Many, let's not forget that the vast majority of Democrats don't give any money at all. It's just it's a small percentage point, a small share, a couple percentage points of people who engage in political giving. So here's just some of the answers that people gave. Lots of we offered a lot of different choices. So this gives you a sense of certainly outreach matters a lot. I mean, anybody who runs an organization or fundraising network knows that the more you ask, the more you get, and the more you explain and walk people through your work, And um, and so that comes through here. And of course, personalized outreach from candidates and campaigns makes a big difference as well. You'll see here, that people being persuaded by research of impact, that tracks from the earlier finding about, that many people are looking for increasingly data-driven kinds of metrics to give them confidence that their money is used effectively. This is a new question for us this year, the impact of fundraising events. In part, it reflected an internal conversation we had at Blue Tent about whether we should do these events, have online briefings to engage our donors and try to raise more money that way. And we decided that we didn't really want to invest a lot of energy there, that we were going to focus on email and other means of outreach. But you can see from the answers here that these are do have some impact. And I know that particularly for some organizations, they're central. I mean, they are Focus for Democracy is like its whole strategy is a relational fundraising and these very compelling events. If you didn't go to any this year, uh, certainly sign up and start attending them in the future. That through that strategy, Focus for Democracy raised $140 million in this cycle, which is really impressive. Obviously, a lot of other fundraising networks do events and did events during this election cycle. This is a question that Blue Tent has been looking at for a long time, and obviously has gotten much attention across the progressive ecosystem. There's some organizing work going on right now, focused on trying to change practices of fundraising abuses. Get Act Blue to change some of its practices. Anybody with a phone, an iPhone, or has experienced what we're talking about here. There's just the endless deluge of spammy texts, and your email box is being filled, and as I said, so much of the information that's coming in through those kinds of communications is just really questionable and misleading and I think damaging. It treats donors like they're idiots, that they actually think that midnight deadline where they need to raise $6,431 is real. So no wonder people have been turned off by this. And this top figure here of, yes, I give less, 40% of people saying they give less because of fundraising abuses, really, to me, is a powerful warning sign. And yet another one that the practices of Democratic, particularly party committees and candidates, but also some progressive organizations, super PACs and others, that these are putting everything at risk in terms of engaging more people. As I said, there's so many people who don't give. We need to pull them in. We need to get current givers to give more. And it's going to be hard to make that happen if people just recoil from making any donations, because it just means that they are bombarded forever after. And here again, we had, the comments on this part of the survey were just explosive and went on and on and on with how disturbed people are by this and how they want it to stop. And they can't even look at their phones between, September and November, I didn't replicate any of those comments here because I think everybody has felt this, and seeing the comments would not be telling you anything that you haven't said yourself through gritted teeth. So we asked the question, well, what would you like to see differently? I mean, what would the ideal kind of communications be from candidates and PACs and committees and progressive organizations? And not surprisingly, the number one was just fewer fundraising emails and texts, you know. And I mean, I just find it astonishing that the same candidate would text me like 4 times a day. And presumably, their campaign is doing that because it works. But again, it's putting the commons at risk. It's like grazing, overgrazing. It puts all the flow of money at risk. Second top thing people really wanted to see is less panic and more analysis and logic, that they don't want all the scare tactics that fundraisers are employing, that they don't want that kind of stuff coming in through their email and text messages, and also on their social feeds. And certainly this has been something in Blue Tent's work that we think about a lot, that, we are not in the fear mongering business. People have enough anxiety. We don't need to ramp up more anxiety. We need to get them to look closely at their options, to think about what capacity they have to give, and to make the best choices that they can. And telling them all sorts of terrifying things is not going to help them be clear-headed and make the good decisions they need to make. Again, you also see here the real desire people have for evidence of impact. And I have been, just anecdotally speaking, as somebody who looks at a lot of progressive organizations, is on a lot of mailing lists, I am continually underwhelmed by the impact case that organizations make. And maybe they don't realize how much donors crave that. And they think that the way to donations is through a more emotional message. But this is the second survey in a row where this desire among donors has come through loudly and clearly. And organizations need to pay attention. We asked, this was a rather ominous question. It's very discouraging election we just had, and we really wanted to know how people were going to behave going forward. Many people on this call, I'm sure, have been in this crisis mode since 2016. They've given a lot of money. In some cases, we hear anecdotally really more than they should. And there's a real question of how long can people keep it up, and will they keep it up? And also, will there, is there disenchantment with how money is raised, going to, and the lack of communications they get about impact, is that going to cause them to pull back? And, in addition to the 2024 election results, which were so disappointing, largely, lots of bright spots too, let's not forget. But happily, half people said no change, and another 15% said they're determined and they're going to give more. And I believe that probably that 15% number is actually going to go up once this new administration gets busy. So, you got a strong majority of people saying they're not going to reduce their giving, or will give more, and a pretty small number that feel discouraged and plan to give less. And that is unfortunate to hear, although again, I would hypothesize that some of those people who plan to give less or feel discouraged may change their tune when they see what's happening in Washington, and also when they look at the 2026 election, and particularly the possibility of retaking the House and making some other gains. Just a few takeaways to conclude here. Again, this survey went out to people who are part of fundraising networks, right? This is not the normal Democratic donor base writ large. Yet even the people who are part of fundraising networks do give in largely conventional ways. They give mostly to candidates. They get a lot of their information from candidates and party committees, and give money to super PACs, Democratic super PACs, and um, uh, but we're definitely seeing real movement in terms of people discovering funding intermediaries, learning about them, getting excited about getting better information and understanding that there is really good information that they can get if they look for it and want it. Um, and I think that the ways that money is raised really need to catch up with where donors are headed, treat them more as adults who are, think analytically and want real information. And the longer, more in-depth email that is filled with some real meat is going to move a lot of people. I mean, especially if you consider who the Democratic donor class is. It's large, highly educated for the most part, largely older people. Many of the professional people that these people want real information. So let me stop there and can open up for some questions.
Yeah, so ask away in the chat. First come, first served. Type away. In the meantime, it's been exciting to see people having live conversations during this debrief. That is the purpose of this survey, is to spark conversation and for each of us to learn from what happened and plan. On that note, so prior questions did get a little mixed in there. Don't know what's outstanding and not. One question that did come up for us, David, is why bother if we're not getting a representative sample? Why even bother collecting data at all? David's a former think tank person, so
Yeah.
we'll take his perspective.
Well, this would be an example of my better than nothing test, which I often apply to the things I do, which is that if the choice is nothing or something, I usually go for something. And as I said, we have tried to get Act Blue interested in a donor survey, which would be the best organization to do this. They have the largest number of, I mean, obviously, that's where all the donors are, and their donors donate to a wide range of different kinds of things, both organizations and candidates. And it would be phenomenal to have Act Blue put together. It doesn't even have to be all 14 million people or whatever it is. It'd be better to have Act Blue put together like a real representative sample of what they thought of like the left donor base writ large, and to administer the survey that way, and to also have crosstabs and demographics. I mean, we could certainly imagine how to do this and do this a lot better, but so far they haven't been interested, and we'll keep asking. But in the meantime, we're gonna get whatever information we can to make our work, give insights that will help us and the 18 other co-sponsors in this collaboration do our work better.
Yeah, and to build off of that, there was also an outstanding question that I will only address very briefly because we're here to talk about the survey, not an open letter, but there did happen to be an open letter that went out to Act Blue earlier this morning, 142 people that are consultants, nonprofit leaders, of which I am one, candidates, donors and donor organizers, asking for Act Blue to take some more steps to protect donors and giving some ideas. We had a really lovely initial conversation with their communications director yesterday, who assured us that it is a big part of the roadmap in Q1 and Q2 2025. And, this survey effort is also something we would love to collaborate on them with. So any Act Blue people that are here or watching this recording, we're really excited to collaborate and, making sure that donors are protected from fundraising, spam, and scam. Okay, so David, have you looked at the questions more
Yeah,
than
I'm looking at a lot of the questions. Actually, Doug Foote had a great question or comment that he said that he thought candidates did look at all this stuff going out in their name, and if that's true, then it's like shame on the candidates. Are they really looking at if they're really looking at the four spammy texts I'm getting every day in election season, then I guess they have been sold by their fundraising consultants that this is something that will help them raise money, and maybe they're right. Maybe this is just the reality of the dark arts win in this world of fundraising.
We got a question from Jason on why Act Blue would not be interested. If there's an Act Blue person that would like to speak, feel free to, but we are not representatives of Act Blue. We cannot speak for them. But if we want to get back to questions about the survey in particular, diving in, feel free. Okay, so Stephanie asks, how do you drive investments into organizations doing long-term organizing and infrastructure building in places that aren't battleground states where we need to build the tent? Well, I'm with the founder of an organization called Blue Tent, so I'll pass it over to you, Dave.
Yeah, well, there's actually other organizations that there are organizations out there that are specifically looking beyond the battleground states um, and investing in places that are not in contention. I'm thinking of the Black Voters Matter Fund, which invests in a lot of places that aren't current battleground states, as an example. There's Movement Voter Project. And the argument I've made to donors is to think of their fundraising, giving, their political donations, kind of like as they think of their financial portfolio, which is, you have stuff that is a little more, maybe a small portion that's a little more out there and long term and risky. And I think that if all of us gave 10% or 15% to make sure that we're funding organizations in places like Mississippi or Oklahoma, then we'd have stronger infrastructure. And we just saw in Nebraska a very close Senate race that nobody expected. And one reason that I think that campaign was not more successful is there's not the kind of infrastructure in Nebraska that there should be. Now, it happens. There is a strong civic donor table in Nebraska. There is a lot of work focused in Omaha. Nebraska 2 is a swing district, so that brings in a lot of money. But I would not be surprised if we see some more kind of progressive-minded independent candidates in places like that. And when they emerge, you want some progressive infrastructure there to help them out.
Say the questions, y'all. We're here for you.
Are you reading? Okay, I'm typing things in. Are you not getting them?
Yeah, do you want to, Haley, you want to keep reeling off some questions in case people want to raise their hand? Or
Marshall, how about you? Yeah, ask a question.
Okay, the top question is, what difference does it make when you donate to a candidate? We mostly do this on hope, but do we have any evidence that it affects the electoral outcome at all? Particularly given that watching the ads on TV is a lot less common than it used to be, because everybody has these little digital commercial skippers and we use them a lot. So tell me, what do you do with the money?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of research that suggests that actually money does matter. A lot of it is wasted, for sure. As you note, especially, in the TiVo era, and also with early voting, people are often or have voted already and they're seeing ads. And then the nature with sometimes ads are showing up in districts where the candidate's not running. I've seen a bunch of those in the last year. But money does matter on the campaign and candidate side, particularly for down ballot races, no question. I mean, we've often argued that donors should prioritize more down ballot races. State legislative races are often costing a couple $100,000, and donors can get a lot of bang for the buck at that level. for sure, money matters when it comes to supporting voter engagement groups. These people, these organizations that use the money to hire staff to engage voters. Of course, there's questions about where your money might matter most when given to such groups. There's groups that are more effective than others. We argue that small donors in particular should prioritize organizations over candidates, in part because they can have more impact on races up and down the ballot, right? So, if you give money to a group like Lucha in Arizona, which is one of our main recommendations for Arizona in the last election cycle, Lucha's out fighting for the top of the ticket and the Senate, if there's Senate race and, House races and state legislative races. And so you're getting a lot of bang for the buck, whereas if you just give to a candidate in Arizona, all that money is just going to go to their race, as opposed to turning out voters who will help Democrats in races across the ballot.
All right, David. So Tracy asks, any discussion or education about the types of money people can give, like between C3 and PAC, and how the funds can be used?
Well, there's a lot of options out there, and one thing that people find so confusing is that there are so many choices, and for some people, the one level of choice. There's the candidates versus organizations, or party committees versus super PACs, or organizations in this state or that state, or national organizations. There's a lot of choices out there. Of course, one fundamental choice is C3 versus C4. And a lot of people have money in a donor advised fund, or maybe they have a small family foundation and they have many resources on the C3 side, and maybe very limited resources on the C4 side. And we've tried to give donors, like other organizations, like other fundraising intermediaries, good advice on where their C3 dollars can have the most impact. And almost every election cycle, the last two election cycles, we made a lot of C3 suggestions. As you get closer to the election, though, C4 dollars are just absolutely more important for organizations, and your C3 options for high impact tend to decline. So if you want to give C3 dollars, the sooner the better, in an election cycle. And because a lot of these progressive organizations that do voter engagement, they're out there engaging voters in nonpartisan ways year round. Some of them have direct services that they provide and other things that they do with C3 dollars. And there's a lot of ways that they can build those relationships long before the election. And you can support those and get a tax deduction.
Can I raise my hand here? I haven't figured out how to use the little dashboard to raise my hand. So my question here is, you probably got my name from Oath. And the question is there anyone else like Oath who helps you pick a few candidates out of the 10,000 or so people that are running in a given election year? That's actually a very daunting task for an individual, and really ought to only be done once, right? You shouldn't have to have every individual voter figure that out.
Yep. Well, beyond Oath, Swing Left also does this, and then different fundraising networks do it as well. So like some smaller, place like Force Multiplier, then there's large places like Emily's List. They also help people figure out their candidate options. I have opinions on which of those organizations might be the best to turn to, but and then there's a couple organizations that are focused specifically at the state legislative level, which is really confusing because there's 5,000 or 6,000 state legislators, whatever it is, I can't remember mini state legislators, right? And so you have a sister district, sister district is in that space, helping guide people to the most effective state legislative races. And the States Project operates there as a funding intermediary. Of course, let's not forget ballot initiatives, which are very important and can also be overwhelming. I mean, tons of ballot initiatives all over the place. We recommended the Fairness Project as our top recommendation for people interested in giving to ballot initiatives. So, no matter what level you're thinking of giving at, usually, regarding candidates, usually there's some good, you can find some good options out there to guide you.
I saw Doug Foot. Your hand was raised. You wanna ask a question, Doug Foot?
So this is something that I've been involved with in various capacities, trying to help donors figure out the best, getting the best bang for your buck, finding those races where your dollar can go the farthest, or if you care about certain issues, where you want to put your money. At the end of the day, you can do as much of that as you can, but everyone has a different opinion on what effective means and what outcome you're looking for. So I think David's recommendations are great. If you're looking for state legislative, you have some options. If you're looking for ballot initiatives, you have the Fairness Project and some other groups like that. But yeah, even as much as you drill down and do the research and crunch the numbers, there are people are just going to have different opinions on how to be most effective.
Yeah, that's a great point, Doug. And different donors have different interests in terms of what they want to do, and what really moves them, with some, gravitating more toward that data-driven approach, and some really wanting community-based groups, and some really wanting to invest in a specific state, and others wanting to give to national organizations working across multiple states. So, lots of different things people are interested in.
A friendly reminder that we're all donors and we all have our own preferences and we're learning each other's. Lori, you have the floor.
Yeah, it seems like every week there would be another organization pop up. I tended to ignore them and stick with the tried and true. But why does this happen? And is it possible for someone to research and find out if they're legitimate? I don't know why these people don't just join an existing organization instead of making their own, whether it's reliable or not. Thank you. Question?
This is a problem. There's a lot of organizations, and there's too many organizations, and there's need for consolidation, and that is it's something across the nonprofit sector that we see, and we see it in the political space as well. I mean, there's a gazillion, super PACs, and you never heard of, and there's a lot of very questionable super PACs that really exist just to enrich their consultants. So that's a kind of added layer of this being problematic, is that, the more organizations there are, the harder it is for people to figure out which are the legitimate ones. And so really strong organizations that have been around for a long time and have a great methodology and track record may get less attention because of all the competition from places that don't really deserve your money.
Can someone do some research and without getting sued and say, pay attention to these guys and ignore these other ones?
Well, that's what we tried to do at Blue Tent. We don't do the negative side of the equation, which is bash the organizations that we don't like. We just highlight the good ones and drive people to those.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Wow. Sometimes time works in our favor. We are, I believe, at an appropriate time to end this. Huge thank you to our partner organizations that made this possible. As David said, something is better than nothing, and we have a lot to learn in the coming months ahead, and look forward to doing it with a lot of y'all here. Enjoy your holidays.
Care.
All right. We are both going to leave. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah.